And you're very welcome to the edition of What Matters with myself, John Prendergast, here in the facilities of the Tralee Institute of Technology. And at our outset, we have to thank most sincerely the authorities and the management of the college for allowing this, and our very good friend and colleague in the college, Jim Quinn. And on today's programme, we will be discussing a number of issues, both the water, the health issues, and of course, on everyone's lips, the Apple issue as well. I'm joined by Toireasa Ferris, who is a councillor with Kerry County Council, Michael O'Gorman. Michael, you're both very welcome, and also Andy O'Sullivan from Abbeyfield in County Limerick. Trish, I just wanted to come to you, if I could firstly, please, with regard to the health issue, because it's not only a local issue, but also a national issue. When you hear of people on trolleys, people can't get admission to hospitals who are genuinely sick. People can't be removed from hospital wards because there's no beds or facilities in the community to look after them. So there's a clogging system from day one all the way. What is happening in your area, or what do you think on a national basis could be done to help?
Well, it's even much more than that. It's even more serious. We have people who are waiting weeks, months for basic appointments just to even receive a diagnosis, and then at that stage they're waiting for weeks, months after that to have biopsies or have follow-up treatment. It's actually more of a sick service than a health service, in my view. And while I fully support, and I've joined the hundreds of thousands of people nationally who protested about the imposition of water charges and the other stealth taxes, it's amazing that we're not kicking and screaming about the crisis that our health service is in. Now Sinn Féin has brought forward a proposal where there would be basically a combined list, that this distinction, which is basically a class distinction between those who have private health insurance and those who don't, would be abolished, and basically it's a due list, and you would take people off of that list in accordance with their need, and if there isn't a timely appointment available in a public hospital, then they would be seen in a private hospital, and vice versa. And it's something that we have to do to try and address the difficulties that are being experienced, that at the end of the day aren't cost effective, because the longer we leave it to treat sick people, the more expensive that treatment is going to be. And I can't see why they won't invest in the services that you mentioned there, say the primary care sector and in the diagnostic sector, so that they are reducing the long-term cost of treatment.
You see, the one thing is that we hear a statistic every day on the news. On a national basis, you have 229 people on trolleys. It's a little less than what it was maybe a few days ago. Maybe the Minister of Health uses that facility or statistic to actually say to people, well, look, it's not as bad. But what we tend to forget is the fact, and politicians tend to forget, it's not a statistic, it's a human being who is ill. You don't go to hospital unless you are sick. So can you imagine all ages on trolleys trying to be seen? And I've been contacted by a lot of nurses all over the country, and to voice one opinion, and that is that they are not happy with the representation that they get from their various unions, number one. Number two is they are getting a terrible level of abuse from the public. And actually there's an element of bullying within the medical service as well. So when you have nurses that are trying to actually perform a fantastic duty all over the country, and with all of that and the restraints and beds being lost as well, I don't know how they're working in this country at all. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and while none of us would ever justify bullying at any level, I think it's endemic within the health service, simply because, number one, there isn't any accountability, and number two, individuals are working in such pressure-filled services that, obviously frustrations are being taken out on those that least deserve it to be so. That's not to justify the behaviour, but there is an issue, and I saw the nursing and midwives page on Facebook. They shared a quote recently. I don't know, did you see it, Pixie? It was, good workers are very hard to find. That's why idiots are promoted to management. Now, I'm not for 1 second saying that the managers within the health service are idiots, but there are far too many in managerial positions, yet there still isn't any accountability.
Yes.
So that there's some duties obviously not being performed or not willing to be performed, and you have this vacuum there. And I have, as an elected representative, dealt with very many people who work within the public sector, particularly in the health sector, come to our office looking for help because they feel they are being bullied in the workplace, they feel they are being harassed, and they don't feel, despite all the mechanisms that have been negotiated by the union and the procedures that are there, they don't actually feel that there is a real venue for them to get justice and to have that behaviour dealt with.
Okay, first, thank you, Tricia, for that. Michael, you're a community activist. You also were independent going in the last election as well. You have very, very strong views on the health issue as well.
On the health issue, it's it all goes back to the crash in 2008, and austerity that came after that, and all the cuts to the hospitals and the health system, and the stoppage of hiring on other workers. Now, since 2012 to 2015, there was a 33% increase in management in the hospitals, but not with staff. And figures, as you say, the government used figures saying we hired this amount of nurses, but then on the other hand, they don't say that X amount of nurses have left, which is more nurses.
Yes, of course.
Now, I have been on the wards with family members, and I've spent long times in the wards over a period of a few years, and I've seen the nurses on the wards and what they do. There's 3 nurses, you have 30 patients, 30 patients in all different types of conditions.
Right.
People that can't go to the bathroom. I've seen nurses where, and I must, first of all I want to say is nurses, the staff inside there and the young doctors, they keep it going, but especially the nurses, they really keep it going. But like, if someone can't go to the bathroom and they have an accident inside in their bed, it takes 2 nurses to come down, change them. It takes a half an hour, change them, clean the bed, wash them, put them back in the bed. But that leaves 1 nurse then for 29 other patients that need a thing, and you can be sure. So just running from one place to the other place to the other place above, it's dire when you're on the wards. And until you sit in the wards and see what the nurses go through, the running and racing, and that web page, what's it called again, nurses.
I don't know the exact title.
And the nurses have their own Facebook page and they tell their own stories on it. And if you read them stories, they're heartbreaking.
Well, actually, this programme, I've just been informed as well by the nurses that will be going up on their forum as well.
Right,
because they're fully behind it, and what we're saying in trying to actually make it public at home and abroad what is going on. But I'm going to share a story with you that I was told today by a nurse this morning. I can't give the identity because it would only cause problems for the nurse and staff. But in the last couple of weeks, a group of, we'll call them collar and tie people from health service, etc., came to a hospital and watched the management of a ward. Now, it just actually ties in exactly with what you were saying there. And at the end of the monitoring, they actually had I call it a brass neck, to turn around to the matron and said, your nurses are spending too long on an individual patient. And the reason is that is why there's no efficiency. So therefore what they are saying, and we're suggesting in their report, is allocate X amount of minutes to each patient. Now, that to me is so absurd and insulting, not only to the nurses but also to the patients. So if John Prendergast is in a hospital bed and a nurse comes up and says, Mr. Prendergast, you need to go to the toilet, we need to inject you, we need to medicate you, we'll give you 3 minutes. Where are you going?
Well, I as I say, I've sat in the wards for different reasons and family members, but only just recently I had to spend some time in the hospital. And there was a man inside the hospital, and I'm not too sure of his condition, but he'd just lie there in the bed and he'd just go, help, 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 help. And in a silent ward, that is heartbreaking.
It is.
And you go out and you go over and you see if the man is okay and what you can do, and he'll take a nurse. You go looking for a nurse, then you can't find one. And you can't go chasing nurses into other wards because they're looking after other people.
They are, yes.
So I would stand in the hallway for whatever length of time and then get a nurse and say, look, he's inside, he's just saying help.
Yes.
I've seen people actually tied to a bed inside the hospital because this patient would wonder, I don't know what their illness was, it's a few years back, but they had to actually pin the person to the bed do you know?
Yeah.
And so they're inside the wards. What's going on inside the wards isn't making anyone healthier, the patients.
No,
it's
no.
depressing.
It
and
has to be.
And if you go visiting people and spend time sitting inside there, you'll come home and you'll be shattered.
Yes.
The hospital would just take that much out of you. So I don't know how the nurses do it day in, day out.
They're fantastic.
And they're
people.
fantastic.
They
And the young nurses on $6.50 an hour.
Is that
So
what they're on?
That's what they're on. And
But
this-
you're, isn't
$6.50
that
an
below
hour.
the minimum wage? Is
It
that
is, yeah.
illegal? That's illegal.
I was talking to trainee nurses, yeah, for the first or their 4-year training. It's on $6.50 an hour, as far as I'm concerned. I was talking to one girl there. She was living in Dublin. It was a gang of them just into a flat, but to do her training.
Yes.
So that's why once they get their qualifications, they're gone to Australia, Canada.
Would you blame them?
You wouldn't
With
blame
that?
them. And so the whole health system is. We had a big review. What are we going to do?
Yes.
And the review was more management. As I said, 33% management. Now they're on about putting it, breaking up the HSE to get ready to privatise it, because that's what this government is about.
They seem to be privatising everything.
That's
including
that's
water.
the philosophy. Yeah, that's the
Yes,
philosophy. Privatise everything, and they're breaking it up, and they want to have trusts that are going to run the hospitals. And even already, the minister is putting the food contract in the hospitals out to
tender.
Out to tender as
to
well.
tender.
So that's their whole thing, is the privatising. I think that they're cutting back on it to let it get so bad that people say we need change.
But that's sinister.
And well, it's
No,
what's going on.
That's people's health. They're playing with.
That's a statistic, and that's the way they're looked at by government,
Oh,
as far as I can
a
see.
statistic, yes, of course.
And that's it,
Yeah.
you know. 500,000 people now are on wait lists in our hospitals. And I think they're leaving it get so bad that people would accept privatisation of the hospitals,
And-
which would be a disaster.
And there won't be any guarantee of an upgrade of services then. Andy from Abbeyfield, how are you?
I'm fine,
And
John,
you're
thanks.
very welcome. Just listening to Trish there and to Michael, I mean, it's in an enormous mess. And I'm speaking to nurses and to medics up and down the country, and we're not fully informed of the real mess on the front line. What's your feeling on that?
It's a horror story, isn't it, really? As Michael said there, there's over 500,000 people on waiting lists. And you put that in the context of the entire population, 4.5 million, that's over 10% of the people are on waiting lists. And that is shocking for a country that, prides itself on its health and its health service, and supposedly a modern, forward-looking country. It's shocking. And it's no blame whatsoever to the frontline staff, as John and Toireasa have said. They do their best in difficult situations, which none of us could probably cope with.
No.
So you can only admire them, respect them. And it's, as Michael rightly said as well, it seems to be getting top-heavy in management terms. And yet they're not putting enough investment in the frontline resources where they need it, beds and staff on the front lines. I mean, you only got to look at the figures day after day, and you're overloaded with them sometimes because they just come at you from all angles. I mean, like 6,000 on trolleys last month, for instance, and it's 14% rise in the month previous. Someone else will come in and say, well, it's 6% down on last year. But that's
ridiculous. That's an insult.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
To the medics and to the patients as well.
Yeah.
But what I can't understand is this: for an intelligent nation that we're supposed to be, why aren't the government and the HSE listening to the medics and saying, look, this is what we need to do? Yet we have a government that's running off now to Europe to appeal a decision where a legal decision, according to the Agricultural Commissioner Phil Hogan, that was given down for 13 billion euro. Even half of that would solve our problem for the next 2 to 3 years on housing, poverty and medical situations. And nothing. We're appealing it. For what? I'll be coming to that a little later as well. Just on the issue you just wanted to raise, Michael, as well.
Just on waiting lists, we'd say there's numbers 500,000. My own personal experience, I'm on disability because I have a back injury. I have.
Yes.
But I went to see the nose, throat, ear specialist, and when I phoned them up, they said it'd be 2 years I'd be waiting. And I phoned them up after a year and a half. I used to get inner ear infection, so it was like vertigo. So it would last 3 months. So they were severe enough when they would last. So I phoned them up after a year and a half, and the receptionist told me the wait list is now 3 years. In the end, when I used to get a bounce. It was during the winter time. It was a sinus problem that would go to an inner ear infection and lead to vertigo. When I went to the hospital in the end, to the secretary, I was wearing earplugs, and then I had to wear industrial earplugs for my kids at home, and they couldn't be anywhere kind of near me in the house, because any sound I had to take sound out of the batteries, out of the clocks, any lights, if I was driving, my perception. I was pretty sick at the time, and as I say, the earplugs, but I brought them into the hospital just to say to the secretary. I was actually crying, and she was very good, and she was actually upset when she was listening to me, and she got me an appointment then, and once the doctor seen me, then I needed the operation. And then once I was in the system, I got the operation,
Right, yes.
and it was done. And I hadn't had a problem since, thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God, yes.
But I spent nearly 3 years waiting for that operation, even just to see the consultant,
Right.
to get the operation. And I had to go in crying, in pain,
Yes.
to get that appointment.
Mhm.
That's a disgrace. And I know there's lots of other people out there with way worse conditions. But it used to affect me for 3 months and 4 months of the winter. The other thing is I'm on disability because of my back. I got an appointment this year on the 10th of May. I got an appointment to see the pain specialist to get injections into my
Correct.
back. To get injections in my back. I got it on the 10th of May. I opened it up, looked at it. It said the 20th of May 2017 is when I have to wait.
Next year.
So to see a pain specialist, I have to wait over a year.
So
just
you
to
have
wait.
to undergo that level of pain yourself. Painkillers don't work.
The doctor can't do any more for
No.
me. He says you have to go to the next level,
Yes.
and then that's it, is waiting a year.
That's it, yes.
And that is the thing. So you're just left there, and this kills productive for the economy as well.
Of course
even
it
people
does,
sick,
yeah. You want
making them
to
more
work,
sick.
yeah.
That's it. But that's happening all over the place. And as Toireasa was saying earlier, the cost of that is huge for the country. But this is the way our health systems, I say, it's been brought to privatise. I think that's what's the plan by the end of it.
And thanks for that. And now let's go to the water as well, because I've never seen in all my years on this planet anyway, in the last couple of years, I've gone to a lot of protests as well, where I've seen Andy, and well done to you, Andy, as well, for spearheading so many protests in Abbeyfield, Newcastle, West Rockhill, all that area there. But I've never seen so much anger of the Irish people as they have brought out onto the streets with water. And nobody in the government of any time even listened to them. Now we have this. You're suspicious, Andy, are you, of this 9-month commission thing? You feel it's only a red herring?
Yeah, it's to me it's an excuse to find reasons to bring them back in, and then almost like they use the EU as an excuse not to axe them by saying, well, the EU dictated that we have to have them in. They're going to use the commission. This is my personal opinion. They set up the commission just as a scapegoat to be able to turn around and say, well, we've had an independent commission, this is the result they've come up with, and we have to bring them in because they've said, and this is their conclusion. To me, it's just an excuse to pass the buck, for politicians to pass the buck onto the commission, who obviously unelected, so they won't take any responsibility or blame. The politicians, they can just shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's what the commission's come up with. So to me, that's all it is, and it's going to be used down the line just as an excuse to bring the charges back in. That's my own.
So you feel the charges will be brought back in some other guise as well? You know, it could be part of taxation or something. But many of the people in all walks of life have said over the last 2 or 3 years with the protests as well, people are already paying for water in their general taxation. Why impose more? What I couldn't understand, Andy and Michael and Trish, is one very simple thing. The universal social charge was brought in on people's wages, the PRSI was still there, the income tax on top of that, then you have property tax, and then the water charges on top of that. So even today, people are still emigrating from Ireland. They're not coming back, in as much as we are being told by government circles that they are coming back. They're not coming back. And nurses are actually leaving in their droves once qualified, and doctors, they're gone. Can you blame them? Trish, what do you feel will be the outcome of the water debacle, even at the end of the 9 months?
I think that will be determined by the electorate, because I can't see the current government lasting for more than probably that 9 months, and maybe that's why that time frame was looked for. They might last slightly longer than that. I think it's a case of Fianna Fáil playing cue politics and buying themselves time. They went to the electorate promising that they would do what every political party, I think, is morally obliged to do, and that is get rid of water charges, because that is what the overwhelming majority of the people of Ireland want, and anyone that we elect to represent us are supposed to implement laws in our interests and at our will. And I think that Fianna Fáil said whatever they needed to say in their view to get elected, and they don't want to just yet introduce the charges that they agreed to when they were in government.
They did, yes, they instigated.
Tried
yes.
to. My personal viewpoint is that it is just another stealth tax. I spoke earlier about how, you know, we have hundreds of thousands out in the street about water, nobody out protesting about health, but I think for most people the water issue is the kind of straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes.
Listening to international economists like even Stiglitz, he wrote an article during the week where basically he said if any other country in the world had incurred anything from 25% up to 50% of a wage cut in their wages, there would have been a revolution. There would have been people out in the streets, and that didn't happen in Ireland. Irish people, you know, put up with job losses. The excuse that was used by some unscrupulous employers of the recession just to reduce the entitlements that they had, even when there wasn't some justification. In some cases, they put up with the property tax reluctantly, the USC and all of that, our education cuts, our health cuts, and I think that the water tax was just that bit too much. And the Irish people finally, it took until that said, well, what else can we take?
Yes.
Our position is clear. We would not implement water charges. We would abolish the local property tax, and we would remove any of the low to middle income earners from the universal social charge.
Yes.
We think that that is the fairest way, because at the end of the day, whatever tax system you have, and I know we'll be getting to Apple in a short while, it has to be fair. People might not nobody likes paying tax, but at least if you feel that the system is fair, and that the proper services are being resourced
Yes.
from your taxes, we will reluctantly, but we will pay the tax. But when it is as unfair as what has been imposed on the Irish people up until now, it's no wonder. It's just, the only wonder is that it took as long as it did for the Irish people to get out and say, no, enough, it stops here.
And Michael, that's a good point, because Michael, how do you feel personally that on the property tax alone, the property tax, I've been told unofficially, is not actually being paid by people, because 2 months ago, a little less than 2 months ago, the government actually ordered the revenue commissioners, I think that's the way it is, or social protection people as well, to start reducing or deducting the property tax from people's welfare, if they're in arrears, or wages as well. Now, I think that smacks of actual dictatorship. That's what people are saying to me. What do you think of that?
The problem is and we'll just go to Fianna Fáil there with the water. The problem is that in 2007, 2008, Fianna Fáil crashed the economy. We owed 35 billion as national debt. We now owe over 200 billion. Every year we have to borrow 6 billion just to pay the interest on the 200 billion.
Yes.
The government they come out with economic growth of 23%. They said they didn't even do that in Russia back in the 30s, like, you know.
That's even being investigated now.
Yeah, leprechaun economics. But going back to Fianna Fáil with the water, Fianna Fáil were the party to set up Irish Water. Then they seen the way the government, when Toireasa was out knocking at the doors, the amount of people we couldn't get over. People would never go to a protest. We're not paying the water. Especially the older people as well, we found. They just said, we don't have it, yes. We're not paying, end of. Fianna Fáil felt that at their Ardèche a month before the election, they said, we're going to get rid of the charges. And then 2 weeks beforehand, they said they're going to get rid of Irish Water. And that's what they led them into the election. And they pulled the right stroke, they moved straight over and into an area, and that's what they blared out for the 2 weeks before the election. We're going to get rid of Irish Water and charges. The minute the government then was trying to form, they changed their tune. They said, we're only going to get rid of them for 5 years. So what they have done now, they've set up the commission for 9 months, and then they're going to have a vote in the Dáil. The Dáil's going to decide. I think it's 2/3 of the Dáil.
That would be very interesting to see.
Well, I think it's going to be... I don't trust Fianna Fáil as far as you can throw them, right, on any issue. But they will not vote to bring in the charges for one simple reason. As Toireasa was saying there, there's going to be an election the next year, a year and a half. They're not going to bring in charges and then go knocking at the doors and after breaking their other promise. So for whatever reason, but they will try to bring it in 5 years' time, and the reason, and then bring it in to privatise it, to use that money to bring down our national debt.
Right.
Because only by selling assets that's the only way we have at the moment of bringing.
And the Taoiseach said about Apple recently, and the judgment that was given from the European Commission was that they had no right to dictate to us the taxation as a sovereign state.
Yeah.
Yet, at the same time, I sort of laughed when I saw that on the television, because for an intelligent man, he walked himself right into it. Sure, he gave the assets of the country right over to the European Commission when he allowed the Troika in and the IMF in. So, I mean, that's what he did. He sold them. And now he's placating them. And the very fact is, this is what he has done at the government and the previous government, Fianna Fáil as well. They actually cajoled and placated Angela Merkel and her colleagues in Europe, in Germany, with the IMF and the Troika. So, he can't actually have a butter box and say to the Commission and say, you're not going to interfere with us. They can. They're doing it already every October on our budgets. Yeah. But Andy, what do you think about the Apple situation?
Well, I mean, the figures are staggering. 13 billion, and that's only over 10 years. That's only over a 10-year period. People don't realise this, because the Commission can only go back 10 years from when the tax records were submitted by Apple. So they first put in the request in 2013. So it now goes back to 2003. The original deal was in 1991, so you've got a 12-year period anyway between then, which we don't know about. So how much was accrued then that hasn't been paid, that should have been paid? That's one point. But back to the 13 billion that's there anyway. The way I equate it is, when you get the likes of Andy Kenny and Michael Noonan coming on and saying, we have to appeal this, blah, 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 because of what they bring to the country, these multinationals. The way I equate it, it's like selling your TV to buy a DVD player. Coming back, thinking you've got a bargain, then realising you've got nothing to watch your film on because you sold your TV. That's the way I equate it. Or, for instance, selling a couch to go and buy a new carpet, and you tell everybody, look at this lovely carpet we've got. It was worth selling the couch for. Then you find you've got nowhere to sit. You see, we've got a country now that is in such a state with the health service. We've got an education system that is as far from free as you can imagine. And any parent, I'm a parent, any parent will tell you this. It's nowhere near free. It's supposed to be free. And, we've got a mental health service that is in rack and ruin.
Yes.
And we have multinationals that are avoiding paying us billions in tax that would solve those problems and should be solving those problems. So for anyone to turn around and say, well, it's worth it because of a few thousand jobs, to me is nonsense. Because there's nothing to say those companies would up and move anyway, nothing whatsoever. But in return, we've seen our infrastructure and our services get dilapidated through decades when they could be brought up to scratch and be the pride of Europe if we had that money that these companies owe us.
So 13 billion, of course, is only one figure. Now, the point is, as people out there realise, that when you go to a court of appeal, which this is going to go to a court of appeal in Europe, I mean, they could still, after 3 years investigation, as the Agricultural Commissioner Phil Hogan said, after 3 years investigation, legally factual, investigated in every direction with evidence from the Irish government and also Apple, they came up with the fine of 13 billion plus penalties and interest, which will accumulate up to 19 billion. Now, For the for that, can you just imagine that in the Exchequer? Even half of it. And what I find insulting, personally speaking, is that Shane Ross said the other evening on one of the chat shows that that money, the 13 billion, will be put in an account for Ireland Inc. until the appeal is heard maybe 2 or 3 years down. Why couldn't we use the interest of that to supplement education, health, poverty and anything else that is going on? It's so unintelligent, the whole behaviour. It beggars belief. What do you think, Michael?
It's a very tricky one. You'll have the jobs on one side of it, and Apple and the government and the EU. First of all, on the EU, I feel that the EU might even be around in 3 years' time. I think there's another crash coming, and I think it'll be way worse than 2008. One of the reasons is, as we said about Ireland, like other countries, our national debt was 30,000,
Yes.
now it's 200,000. Greece is the same, Spain's the same, Italy at the moment, their banks are in trouble, they got a small bit of a bailout there. We was heading for a bail-in. Bail-in is where it goes and takes the money out of the depositors' accounts,
Yes.
like they've done in Cyprus.
Mhm.
But a few of the big bankers got together and gave them a few pound to plug that hole just for the time being.
Okay.
Deutsche Bank is in serious trouble at the moment.
Is it Deutsche Bank?
Deutsche Bank is in serious trouble at the moment, and from all different types of angles, from derivatives, from its gold, basically, but all banking systems are interlinked.
Yes.
And so once one goes, it will be domino. So the European Commission, for me, have an investigation. It could be gone. The Euro, I think, and the European Union and the European Commission will be gone in the next 3 years. And will be very hard times facing all of Europe and the world
That
economies.
crash is predicted actually even by world economists. That it's predicted. That's frightening.
It's been predicted for the last few years, and they tried to butter it up and stuff like that, and paper over the cracks.
It's not working.
But see, the EU, when it was set up in 1973, it was fine. It was about trading. But then we got the single currency, and they set it up without the proper procedures in places for banks, so there wouldn't be a big, huge flow of money into the likes of Ireland and other states from the likes of Germany. And so when the crash happened in 2008, Ireland were 1% of the population of Europe. We took on 42% of the bank debt. Now, when we bailed out, the bondholders, they were
Yes.
German and French banks we bailed out. So we're after bailing them out already. But now it's coming home to roost in their countries. And when it does fall the next time, it's everything. The ECB then turn around and dropped the interest rates and started doing quantitative easing. Quantitative easing,
right,
where
just printing money
out of nowhere,
yes.
and giving it to big businesses and other investors. And what they started doing then was investing in property markets all over the world, because they had all this free money at a very low interest rate. So they started buying houses and stocks all over the world. They also invested heavily in stock markets. So all stock markets are gone. Whoosh. There's a huge bubble in the stock markets as well. So once one of them goes, they'll all go, the stock markets, and the whole thing is going to crash in top of it. Yes. Going back to the Apple and the tax, the reason Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are jumping up and saying, oh, we have to go to Europe and fight this, is because it's their baby.
Right.
Fianna Fáil, Charlie Haughey, in 1986 set up the Irish financial service sector. They didn't know it was about creating an area with low tax. They didn't know the ins and outs of it, so the group was set up called the Clearinghouse Group, which still runs to today. And the Clearinghouse Group is linked between the Irish financial service sector and the government. Is in between. It sits on the Taoiseach's office once a month. Martin Fraser chairs the meetings. There's no minutes in the meetings taken, so they sit there once a month and put in whatever they want. So they have to go and fight because of Apple, because everything in Ireland is built. They say it's 12.5% tax.
Yes.
It's not. We know the likes of Boston Scientific, all the pharmaceutical companies are paying very low tax rates. They're at about 2%. I'm sure there's tons of them. There's thousands of companies here, plaque companies, set up in the Irish financial service sector. Since the 90s, the Germans and the Swiss have investigations into the Irish financial service sector. Before the crash in 2008, it was called the Wild West of banking, and it hasn't got any. It hasn't got any less power. It's got more power since the crash of 2008. And when I say the Clearinghouse Group comes and advises the government, they come with the new laws written, give to the government, and the government passed them laws. And them laws are to attract companies. So when I say the Clearinghouse Group, I'm talking about like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the KMPG, all the accountancy firms, the bank firm, the big bankers in the world. So they come and they give the government what rules they want. And if you remember a couple of budgets there ago, we had, I think it was 14 acts in the financial, Mr. Noonan changed 14 acts in one budget, and that was just after John Bruton, our ex-Taoiseach, said we have too many regulations in the Irish financial service sector. This is just after the crash. Now, John Bruton, there was a new group set up in just before Fine Gael got into power in 2011, and it was set up and it was called the Irish Financial Service Sector Ireland, and it was run by international bankers and accountancy firms or whatever.
Yes.
And they picked John Bruton as their head chairman. So John Bruton, our ex-Taoiseach, who's on 140,000 a year pension from us, plus his European Commission pension, is now working for the likes of JP Morgan, Citibank, and he also has the power to go on trips with the IDA around the world to bring in these companies.
So that's why
whatever.
you say we have to appeal this.
That's what they're doing.
But it's
now,
appeasing the multinationals, then, isn't it?
This is what has happened. We're trying to please Europe. We sacrificed our people, immigration, evictions, everything, our health, everything.
still
over the
going
last
on.
whatever.
The evictions are still going on.
The evictions are only starting. There's
Yes, they're only
20,000 now.
starting,
They're only
yes.
starting. And not long ago, about 2 months ago, they arrived at a house in Corfin, and there was 8 people dressed with balaclavas on and ski masks,
My God.
and the 2 of them came in the back of the police car. And when the sheriff, well, the acting sheriff came, he didn't even have a warrant for the thing. He only had a piece of paper in his hand. So they arrived on with 2 guards, an acting sheriff, and 8 fellas with balaclavas, and came to the door. Now, a group called the Anti-Eviction Task Force were there and pulled them on points of law, and they retreated, and they haven't come back to the house since, even though they've been asked for all the documentation, and it's gone out to every TD in the country.
But that's
Like,
actual thuggery.
well,
That's thuggery.
That's Ireland,
On Irish
2016.
Irish.
And you have the hedge funds tied in, and these are all brought in. These hedge funds like got red carpet treatment when they come into this country. And then above in the Irish financial service sector, you have stuff like the double Dutch Irish sandwich. So at the moment, Apple didn't break any tax rules. What they're after being fined is state aid, and it's interfering with competition with other companies. So they're kind of a very unique setup that they got there, like, you know. But they wrote the rules along with the big accountancy firms above in the Irish financial service
getcha.
sector. So they wrote the rules, and then the government applied them. The Fianna Fáil, the Fine Gaels, John Bruton was in government way back then, and now he's the head lobbyist.
It's all
for them.
exposed now.
So-
it's
so-
all public.
Yeah, well,
It's all public now.
yeah, so
And Trish, just to come to it, because that is so powerful what Michael has been saying there. And just on that point as well, evictions, it's very, very worrying, because I did an analysis there, and one local councillor in Limerick that got the information for me, literally all over the country, there are thousands of repossession cases before the courts in this country with county registrars. 26 counties. It's in thousands. They're family homes, farms, businesses that people, men and women and children, are being. Father Peter McVerry is the very same man. There's men, women and children being evicted from their home because hedge funds, because vulture funds, because of the whole lot. It's all gone pear-shaped. So what do you think on that?
It's crazy. If it wasn't so serious, it would be laughable. And again, it's incredible to think that as a people, were allowing it to happen. You have the farcical situation in this county where persons who were formerly tenants of a local authority have purchased their house, and for whatever reason, namely because they went to the high interest mortgage companies, have fallen into arrears, and the properties are about to be repossessed.
Yes.
I know for a fact that there are 2 of those properties that would sell for 35,000-40,000 euro tops. Now, the individuals in those houses will go back onto the social housing list because they have a housing need. They will actually be homeless. In one case, there is a physical disability. The house has been adapted for the person. And under the rules that the department has set out for local authorities, now that we are finally allowed to purchase properties, we can't purchase that house. And there has to be vacant possession when you buy it. And even if we could, we could not allow those people to remain in the house. So Kerry County Council is facing a situation where they will have to put a person with physical disabilities into emergency accommodation, of which we have very little, and we know how expensive emergency accommodation is anyway. Somebody with money, with access to 35 or 40,000 euro handy, will buy that house, and they will lease that property to the local authority, make back their investment in a very short period of time, and the persons that happen to be housed in that property will be there for however many years, and the taxpayer in this country will continue to pay to that. And that's on a very, very small scale. So if you look at it nationally,
yes,
the vulture funds, and
that's
that comes back to this whole Apple situation. The vast majority of the vulture funds aren't paying any tax at all in this country because they're not resident. They're not resident here for tax purposes. We have a ridiculous situation where the central bank is renting property from a company to the tune of millions every year. Yet the Exchequer doesn't get a penny of that because they don't pay tax in Ireland. They're not resident here for tax purposes. And it's probably one of the few things myself and Pixie will disagree, and I totally disagree with the position where people have been put into a position of fear where they think, okay, jobs will be in jeopardy and the multinational companies will not invest in Ireland if Ireland doesn't appeal the decision of the Commission. Absolute codswallop. The decision applies up until 2015 when the double Irish was gotten rid of. Apple has expanded, and any existing company at that stage, the arrangements that were made with them at revenue had to be phased out by 2020. Any new companies cannot avail of the sweet deals that they got at that point. And since 2015, we've had a number of multinational companies invest in Ireland. Fitbit last week, 50 new jobs in Ireland. Apple have expanded their operations in Cork, and they're also going to be expanding into Athenry in Galway. It is immoral. I don't care if it is legal. It is immoral that a multi-billion euro company that has 200 billion in cash
I was just about to say cash reserve, 200 billion sitting on their bank account. 13
billion that we're talking about is only 3 months' profit to Apple. It is immoral that they have not paid taxes in the jurisdictions where that was made. And it's depriving people, not just in Ireland, but right across all the European states and indeed in America, of essential services because we aided and abetted tax dodgers. That's what those sweet deals. We may have written the legislation to allow it to be legal.
I was just about to say that very point, Andy,
but it
as
is
well.
Immoral, and laws are supposed to reflect the morality of society.
Yes.
Look at all the self-employed people we have in this county. Look at all the businesses that went to the ground because revenue hounded them. They sent in the sheriff and they seized equipment in viable businesses that just needed a break. It's not that they wanted to not pay them, they needed time. They seized their equipment so that they could no longer continue with their trade and their business, and they went to the ground. Thousands of jobs were lost in this country because of revenue not willing to engage with such businesses. Yet Apple, a multinational company, and let's not forget, despite what every politician on the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael side that have their hands covered in everything that happened here with Apple, and the other multinationals that we don't know yet about.
That will surface now. They will surface.
Let's not forget that Tim Cook told the Senate committee in the congressional investigation into their tax practices, his words, it was an incentive that was offered by the Irish government to get us to invest in Ireland. Now, that is, and yet on RT Radio last week, he said, no, there was no deal.
Of course there was.
There was no
deal.
There
was a deal.
But he said it in a congressional hearing.
I just want to put that to Andy. Yeah,
just 1 second before we go to Andy. I think all corporations should be paying tax. They have to.
They should be paying a fair share.
Since the 70s.
A fair share.
Since the 70s, they brought on a form of economics, neoliberal economics, and that was Reaganism and Thatcherism and Indickinism, I call it now here as well. And it made the multinationals being able to escape, and Ireland became a tax haven for them. I'm not saying it was totally. That's what brought the jobs here, but that's what brought the jobs here. But multinationals need to be paying their fair share into things. Such a huge divide in the world now.
That's the point.
And so just with trades there, it's like I agree totally with you. They have to pay their way. But Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael don't buy into that. They buy into what they have their bid.
But you see, that's the point.
Not saying it's right.
About not wanting to take 13 billion euro that should be paid by Apple. It has to be paid. We need it to be paid, not just for this jurisdiction, but for all the other states that have been defrauded of tax revenue from there. But when it came to the tax bailout, it was, we're going to be the good boys in the house, and they nearly ran to say, oh, we will offer up not just generation, but the next 3 generations.
And that's what they have done. But Andy, I just want to get Andy's point of view on that. And it's something very important that Tricia said there as well, and Michael. Andy, if you can't really blame or castigate Apple or other multinationals, because one thing, they operated within the law. They were given the sweetheart deal. They signed up. We gave it, our government on our behalf gave it to them, and they didn't pay any tax. So the liability of this red-faced issue now all over the world is that our politicians should be held accountable, of all parties that actually allowed these deals to proceed, with all the evidence now we have all over the world that something went on and it wasn't for your benefit or mine. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, probably that's one of the main reasons I want to appeal it. Not just because of the money, not because of what it affected on Apple or other multinationals, but because looking back now, they can see they dropped an enormous clanger. I mean, the manufacturing sector of Apple was given a 40 to 50 million limit for paying tax. They were promised that anything over that, they wouldn't have to pay tax on. They would pay up to that ceiling, and that was it. And anything under, they would still pay up to the 40 to 50 million. And they were given that agreement at the time in 91. So the people who gave them that agreement are looking back now and saying, my God, how much money do we give away? How much do we lose? How much do we cost this country?
That's the kernel.
And that is the nub of it. They're looking back and saying, my God, and we can't admit this now. That's why we're going to appeal this. We can't admit this to the people. How much have we lost over those 25 years since 1991?
Billions and billions and billions were lost to the Irish people that could be fronting our services, our teaching services, our nursing services, health service generally, every other service as well. They have actually now perpetrated over the last 25 years a disservice to the Irish nation. And that's actually what this report.
There's a book there by Conor McCabe. It's called Sins of Our Fathers, and it goes right back to the foundation of the state.
Yes.
And so it's not just the last 25 years in Apple. It goes right back to the foundation of the state. When the big power group that time, well, the Catholic Church, Bank of Ireland got to look after the banking system side of it. The church got to look after, but the ranchers, they used to call them in Meath, the landlords. So all the small farmers, you'd feed them up to a certain side, and then they shifted off to England. So they were the power brokers. Now the Irish financial service sector is. But if you go back, we've given away our oil, we've given away our gas, we've given away the fishing, which was 200 billion, is gone over the waters just in the product of fish since 1974, and that doesn't even all the jobs we lost out if they were brought onto our shores, and we had the houses here, warehouses.
And we're just going to conclude this now. Just finally, Trish.
When I say it may have been legal, I mean it may be argued that from the tax legislation may have been legal. Now there's a section there in the 1997 Act, Section 811, that said if these opinions or rulings, if they're to give a tax advantage to an individual, then that isn't within the legislation. But that's neither here nor there. But the Commission is saying that from the point of view of the laws governing state aid, what happened was illegal.
Yes.
So obviously it'll be for the European Court of Justice to decide whether that determination is correct or not. But it is just incredible that we are going to be known internationally for a government that is championing the rights of multinationals to avoid paying tax.
Correct.
Yet we let down our citizens every opportunity we have been given.
Do you know what? I'm just going to conclude with one statement. Doesn't it make the whole debacle of Rio look very, very minute in comparison to what is happening now? When you think of it,
No, but it's the same thing.
I know.
It's the same thing.
I know
The
exactly.
corruption is on that level.
Yeah.
It's on the local level.
Yeah.
Right up to the Irish Financial Service. It's on every level in every aspect
And
of
to
whatever.
conclude with that, it's still people lose their homes, people waiting on trolleys, 3 years waiting lists, and other people, the fat cats get bigger and fatter and richer, and there we leave it. Trish, thank you so much indeed. It was great having you, Trish Ferris. Great having you, Michael O'Gorman. Andy O'Sullivan, thank you so much indeed. And we're going to conclude just with a piece that you wrote there for the Simon community. And thank you so much indeed to all of you.
How did it get to this? How did I get here? When did my hopes and dreams suddenly disappear? There's nowhere I can go, there's nowhere I can stay. Nobody wants to know in these busy streets each day. All my thoughts drift into nothing. All my senses slip away. All my life it should mean something to someone is lost in this world of nameless days. On a shop window TV, the newsreaders on the screen, they're pointing to their pretty charts as if this is all it means. And a headline screams at me from a newspaper blowing by, says the corner has been turned, and this rain stings my eyes. All my thoughts drift into nothing. All my senses slip away. All my life this should mean something to someone who's lost in this world of nameless days. In the freezing cold I lie, too tired and afraid to roll. A family sits nearby, the banks repossess their home, and a poster on the wall shows a government TD. He's begging me for my vote. It's the last thing I ever